really more governance than management. We focus on the what and the why of what the superintendent does rather than the how, which is the management piece. And that's the way that it's laid out by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The indicators that we focus on are very specific. They were chosen from a list that we had to choose from, and we just focus on those indicators. The way that we rate within that indicator is also very prescribed. There are examples given for how we do that. For example, an exemplary rating would be something that talks about not just what the superintendent's doing, but how that you're able to. Sorry, it's very awkward to talk about you with you right next to me.
The whole night is awkward.
But the way that you're able to inspire your team to do that and to collaborate and work with them to empower them to a different level. So as an evaluative body, we're individuals, and it's important for us to be able to come to a consensus to make one final document that will be the evaluation. So what we're doing tonight, this piece of it, is we're going to go over what we filled out for the forms individually, and then we'll come back to this next week with one merged document after we've come to some kind of consensus tonight. So again, we're really focused on the outcome here rather than the implementation. And then I want to make sure that it gets up with our minutes and for next week what the actual rubric is, so that people, when they're listening, are able to look and to understand what it is that we're talking about. So with that said, I think we could go ahead and dive right into it. Let me just pull my document up too. Okay, so I think what we've done in the past, and I think makes sense, would be to kind of talk about each piece one by one, and then just kind of go through and talk about what we each have had, and then to kind of find where the rating makes sense. And then if everybody could get me their comments by the beginning of next week. I know the weekend is probably busy for everybody, so just sometime in the beginning so I can get it together into one document ahead of the meeting so everyone can review it. And then when we're in the public meeting, we can go from there. Okay, so starting at the top, and I'm going to leave the assessing on the standards, the overall stuff, to come back to at the end. So I've done something funky here. So the superintendent's performance goal. I'm going to start with, and I know, I don't know if anybody else struggled with this, but going back and taking the presentation that was so lovely that you gave last week and putting them into the actual evaluation form, like the number one, the student learning goal versus the professional practice. I went back and looked at what we did over the summer to kind of number them that way, but I think we'll all know what we're talking about when we talk about the goal, and we can sync up after. But so the first one I have is the student learning goal is in K-6 math, student learning data will be used to drive instructional changes. Under the direction of the district's K-5 math director, as well as the Hopkinton Middle School Math CTL and the Hopkinton High School Math subject matter leader, teachers, tutors, and principals will understand curricular, instructional, and assessment changes and implement and monitor these changes to ensure both growth and achievement for math students K-6. The Hopkinton High School SML will navigate the impacts of changes on high school math curricula. So is that where everybody is with the student learning goal?
That's good. Yep.
And anybody in particular want to jump in to start?
Sure, I will. I checked that one off as having been met with a couple little asterisks on there, because I know it was noted that 6th grade math is considered an ongoing sort of project, but I still feel like the goal is been met, even though, I think that the whole point was to use the data to drive instructional changes, and the fact that those changes haven't totally been implemented yet and it's still an ongoing doesn't mean it hasn't been met in my mind. So that's what I was thinking.
I was thinking along the same lines, actually, and that I, in terms of that, was feeling like met. It will have been exceeded in my mind once that's fully done.
Exactly.
Great.
In actuality, probably there should have been a 2-year goal in there. I have some comments. I don't even want to get to that about extraneous factors that impacted the goals.
Yep.
Because I think for me, just in general, for the goals in particular, I felt like, let me find, there's so many documents, hang on a second.
I know, that's why I had two devices
I
ready
should have gone
on the
with
ready.
paper, I think, but anyway, the things that I noted that I thought probably influenced your ability to achieve goals in general. The ESBC2 project this year, which is in one of the goals, and somehow should have been like 6 goals all in one. 'Cause, I mean, the number of meetings, the amount of time that you had to put into that, and especially with the compressed time frame because of COVID and how we hit the MSBA, everything. So I thought ESBC2 was a factor in general. The upcoming administrative turnover, I think there's been some, probably has, with some of the goals, you know, particularly around the professional, whatever it is, the professional goal, professional development goal, and maybe some other goals as well. That has probably been a factor. The extended budget process and the last minute scrambles that we had this year, which were different. Again, all time drains. So I don't know. I felt like there were some different things this year. And the fourth thing that I listed was a new shift in the town discussion, which I think hits your world a lot, on the 5 and 10 year projections. I think that as that awareness of our enrollment and what that really means for the community has started to take root, which is great. You've been doing a lot of communicating. And so I think all of those time pieces, for me, I think we rate how we rate, but I'd like to see those kind of things factor into the narrative.
To be fair, I actually put exceeded, and I know the 6th grade still needs work. I have like 3 paragraphs in my comment, but the first paragraph is specifically about this, so I'm going to just talk about it. I think when I look at that goal, the growth over the past couple years, you know, because I looked at the STAR assessments that were not math last year, and now this math assessment, right? And what I put was Carroll and the school district's commitment to using data to determine student learning by doing assessments at the beginning of the year and several times during the year becomes more extensive, leading to a much more detailed understanding of each student's need. At the same time, the district doesn't just stop at the cold hard facts, which is where I think the exceeded part comes in for me. Stealing Holly's love and statistics here. The data comes into coming up with creative programming to address the imbalances. And that programming sounds like fun. So it isn't just about getting the kids to, you know, go up in learning a year, which is the goal in the end. But it's about really motivating them to enjoy that growth in that year. It's a warm, caring way to grow skills. The data becomes real interventions, and that is an ability that even some of the largest corporations that I know of out there don't have, right? So this, to me, that's where the exceeded came in, is it wasn't just the student learning data will be used to drive instructional changes, it was the character of the instructional changes that were put into effect. So,
Yeah, I actually had exceeded as well for that, but I again, with the grade 6 math, we didn't hit it, so technically if we go by what was written, it was, you know, met.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, fell short in that one area, but given the fact that when it was opened up, it was deemed to need more time, I was very thankful. I wouldn't want to really ding the administration, and Carol in particular, for not taking that time. I think it would have been more detrimental to rush it. So, since we've all lived through so many math iterations and math design changes over our careers. So
I'm fine with exceeded. I was sort of the Met plus, and I could be swayed either way. I don't know how you
Right.
feel.
Well, that's that's how mine was too. With that the little asterisk that said, I get that the 6th grade is a work in progress, but I definitely am comfortable either way because I know that an enormous amount of work went into it, and all the data-driven decisions. Those are more in my in the performance standards I have, you know, that they're all connected. It is what it is. But I mean, still, I think it, you know, that piece is so huge, and you're so good at that piece. So
Yeah, 100%. I also feel some pressure as I'm doing it when I feel like I have a number of other exceeded things. I feel like everybody's going to think I put exceeded for everything,
yeah.
which is not fair, but
we can straddle for now and circle back.
Yeah,
All right.
I
Okay.
think that makes sense.
The next one is the professional practice goal, which is begin the work of aligning and merging the district's work in
that was the-
DEI and social justice, culturally responsive practices, and social emotional learning. This work should illustrate and ensure interconnectedness of DEI, social justice, CRP, and SEL. Concurrently, continue the goal of growing the CPAC and the LPAC. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Sure, can keep the pattern going here. So for the same reasons that I felt like the first goal was met, I also marked this one as met because I think this is one of those that you're never going to stop working on, right? I think that it's an ongoing thing that is going to evolve and change with time, and as we learn new things about how people think and you know, just about individual differences, it's gonna evolve. So anyway, I do think that an enormous amount of work was illustrated in the evidence that you gave to us. I mean, there was, you know, like it could have taken 4 days to really sift through all of that evidence. It was an impressive amount of work that the district has done over the course of the year to really focus on this work. So, I mean, I if anybody else feels strongly about going with exceeded, I agree. But I also think, you know, I think a lot of work is going into CPAC this year and likely will in the coming year. And so I'm comfortable with either, but I marked it as having been met.
And just remember, this is goal 3, DEI.
It is.
I did a different order.
Yeah.
I did a different order too.
There were 2 student learning goals.
So-
and
Oh,
we
this
skipped
is
the second
district
one.
goal, isn't it?
This is
If
the
you use
professional.
district,
Okay.
It's number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is goal
Number
number
three.
3, but I put it in based on what was in the summer thing as,
Which was
The
in
professional
professional
I think
practice.
math, and I think that's for
Okay.
the
I
administrative
thought
team.
for the administrative.
well, that
team.
was what I had initially thought too. That's what but
Oh, we
looking
messed up
back
in
on
the
the other
summer.
thing.
Well,
Okay.
I had met for this one too, and part of the reason why, of what you've already said, was, you know, again, I was kind of feeling like maybe in retrospect we probably should have discussed a 2-year goal for some of this. Like, I want to see the results that what we do with the Metro West Health Survey results that we got. I know you just got them, so that's not exactly fair. But the challenge was with CPAC that are, you know, we faced, we're addressing, and we're moving forward. But still, I felt like this was a met for me.
Same boat. And probably for exactly the same reason as I put Matt.
I actually put exceeded on this one, but I'm happy to kind of go with the majority. And a couple of the reasons I did is, one is I think this is an area that has been of strong focus in the district, that the LPAC in particular, I feel like is a really strong, vibrant group. That has really been work that has been done this year. And, you know, active and really responsive to the needs of those parents and those families. The CPAC, when I look at not just the bumps, you know, but also the broader context to me is that we started the year back in June, the school committee year, and we had 1 CPAC board member. And now, you know, I think Mr. Kumalo said it at one of our public hearing, that while the discourse sometimes can be uncomfortable, the fact that we're having conversations, I think, is a big thing. And I think the fact that we were willing to, you know, kind of under your real suggestion as well, to bring this to a place of mediation so we could find a way to move forward to work on that policy that we've been working on. That was my thinking. I'm totally fine with the MET. I just wanted to share my thought process.
I mean, in this entire topic, from my very first year on school committee, I think I've been consistently wowed. I mean, unfortunately, you set a high bar.
Yes.
Because I've been consistently wowed. I mean, it was right in your goals, and has been consistently since 2018. So, you know, even with that said, even though there's a huge amount of work that we do, and, you know, we don't have to do this work, Dr. Kavanaugh's made it a focus, and I appreciate that. Even with all that, I think, unfortunately, I was like, oh, well, we fell short. But the way the goal was written and the way the specifics, I felt like it was more met than exceeded. But that isn't to say that we don't do incredible work as a leader, a district that leads in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Okay. All right, the next one is the other student learning goal, or at least that's how I had it tagged. In keeping with the K-5 focus on redesigning the district's writing curriculum alongside a 6 to 10 commitment to the implementation of disciplinary literacy instruction, I will have a second student achievement goal focused on writing curriculum, instruction, and assessment. If we believe that writing should be used in the service of reading and content area knowledge acquisition, this goal should raise achievement in writing, reading, and content area knowledge. Want to start again?
Sure. So let me see. Here we go. So I also had this one as having been met. There was an enormous amount of evidence for the 2 focus indicators that I think are related to this particular goal. If anyone, 1B and 1F, with all of the work that was done with the math and writing groups that have, I mean, the amount of work that went into making or thinking about and then making changes. I think bringing in the stakeholders, the administrators, the directors, all of them into the fold and thinking about this and getting sort of that group mentality focused on all of the different ways that you can write across the curriculum and all of the different ways that math has changed and evolved and how we know how people learn now and start moving the district in the right direction. All of the evidence that was supplied for those indicators just, you have mountains of evidence to support how much work is going on in the district for all of these, but in particular for this one. So I put it as having been met, but again, this is another one. I feel like all of them, you can pull me over. I mean, I just, it's one of those, there's so much evidence that probably I should have marked it as exceeded, but I did mark it as having been met.
I put it as exceeded.
So yeah, there you go.
I spent some time looking at this and reading all of the evidence, but I think what caught me was totally not in here, but it was when we were in a meeting and Dr. Kavanaugh said that the math teachers were coming up and asking how they could incorporate this literacy into their curriculum. And I was like, so after reading all the evidence and going back to that kind of thought, it's like, wow, this once again, a very rich thing that the staff has latched onto, that they want to see grow. So not only has it been put in place, but it has been embraced in a way that makes it extremely valuable. And I think that's why I ended up putting exceeded.
I was on the fence, but I went to exceeded. The reason I was on the fence was because I feel like the curriculum for K to 5 was not done, and it was written, so it was
ongoing
met
as well, yeah.
But again, when I factor in sort of the external demands and sort of the conditions, because so much of this goal represents your passion. Like this is you in this goal. It's your expertise and your passion probably has been what has been so successful in bringing the other educators across. So I ended up in exceeded, even though there was, a bullet that we didn't, back when this was originally written, it didn't get done.
Yeah. Well, K to 5 should be done in the summer, but to be perfectly honest, it is not done at this very moment. So I went with exceeded on that. I think there are a lot of strengths in here. I do think this is very much in probably most, if not all, of your career.
Yes.
Jam.
This is your jam.
Yeah, my jam. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back to that, and then the next one I have is a district improvement goal to address enrollment growth and ultimately building use expansion throughout the district, resulting in a 3 to 5 year plan.
Okay, let's on the count of 3. Let's all say our rate. 1, 2, 3.
I didn't even
End of story.
Yeah.
We'll put some comments in there, but
Yeah.
Yes. That you can't really exceed that more than just the amount of time. And sometimes the amount of time that things had to shift very quickly. I know submitted a lot of really lengthy things to the MSBA that would probably take me years to come up with something far inferior.
Yep.
So.
And defended and all, yeah.
Working like 18-hour days on a regular basis.
Yep.
Yeah.
and we sat in the summer. I didn't know that we could do it. I didn't believe that we could get to the point that we have a long way to go, but I didn't believe that. I wasn't totally convinced that it was doable. So
And all of the forums and all of the ways that you were trying to bring the visioning group to bring in different voices in this process along the way, it is huge.
And getting from feasibility to preferred schematic design, it's been amazing, honestly.
Oh, it's huge.
Oh my
In
gosh.
such a short period of time. Totally.
It feels like a long period of time in some ways because we talk about it a lot, and because you've been, I know that takes up a huge chunk of your week, but it really, a year ago, we were not.
barely
Oh
a
my
year,
gosh,
yeah.
when I saw the schedule from the designers, like that was
was
the
this
summer,
long.
in the summer, and they were like, in 3 months we're gonna be here, and I was like,
the meeting schedule, but yeah, so that schedule
God.
too.
I was not sure we could do it.
It was a very aggressive undertaking, and it definitely came. It's happening. So, yes,
All right, so the final goal is.
right.
Final goal is a district improvement goal to grow the administrative team to improve communication, unity, and care for one another, and refocus the team on teaching and learning.
All right. So I went, I don't know, maybe I need to rethink I went back to Matt on this one.
so bad.
I really appreciated all of the admin council, the agendas were all catered exactly to this end, I felt like. Everything on there was really about, and it was about getting everybody sort of back into the mindset like we were on the other side of what has been a really challenging 3 years, and now we can start thinking about what we used to do, and maybe, you know, with the changes that have happened over the last 3 years, now we got to incorporate those, but this isn't going to be the focus anymore. Now we're moving on. And I think you did a fantastic job with that. And I think folks, the feel in the school, and I know this is about the administrative team, but the feel in the school overall really is like, all right, we're there. We're getting the ball rolling in. Things are getting back to normal. Things are happening. Events are taking place in the school. It just seems like there's just a little bit more excitement finally that I think folks have been missing. So I think that this is a goal that it was, first of all, nice that it was on there given the climate of the last 3 years. And I really think that an enormous amount of work has gone into meeting this goal. So
I picked Met as well. I think that the growth has occurred. I think there has been improved communication. I think within the administrative team, you can definitely see, you know, a lot more discussion and listening to each other and things like that. I think based on what I saw, I didn't see like.
yes, sure.
Based on what I saw, like in the evidence I had and stuff, like I felt like it was solidly on that, like it was comfortable, and it you know, I didn't see the extra, but then I guess there's so much else that was exceeded that I think it's okay to have a Met.
I had a Met as well, and I think we didn't quite get like the climate team in place. Like there, just a few things that were holding me back. Although, as you both said, you've done a ton of work. I still feel like a solid Met on this one.
I also put Matt, I was just thinking as you say we, I feel like when we're talking about the successes, we always say we. We did excellent. I feel like it's a you in this, most of this. I was torn on this because a lot of work I know has been done on this. I love, you were, talking about the walkthroughs and the placement of kids moving from one building to another and all the work that has been done. And it feels like your team is in a really great place. There are a couple pieces that I know that the district team and whatnot that still have to be done, but I also was thinking about, we have such great administrators that some of them now, have reached for something different and are moving on to other districts in bigger positions in many cases. Right. And that I think is a testament of their growth, and congratulations and yay to all of them. But I also think that some of this work may need to kind of be done again with it. You've got a new team in some ways.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think everybody's human, right? So like if you're spending, X amount of hours doing ESPC2, then you're going to do, well in this other area, but probably, you only have so much time in a day.
And along those lines too, the other thing that I forgot to add is that we have added some new administrators.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as on the one side we're growing layers of administrators, but on the other side now there's just more. Each individual has more time to do the
Right.
things that they need to do instead of feeling so spread thin to oversee the work of hundreds of people. Now they're in the, at least in the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, as opposed to the hundreds, and they can do the job that they really want to do. So.
Yeah, I think when we look at the per pupil expenditure buckets and we look at those director positions, we used to be 316th out of 321 in the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that really speaks to
Yeah.
like the need for people not to be so stretched and have that kind of
Right.
other support.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that moves us into the standards and indicators for effective administrative leadership. In this,
Sorry, Nancy, do you want to hold on
oh, sorry.
resolving our
Yeah,
straddlers?
we can go back.
or do
Yeah,
you
let's go
wanna
back
do
and do the straddlers first. Thank you. All right, so circling back up to the student learning goal, I felt like there were more leaning exceeded on that as a whole.
For math, I think we were 2 and 2.
But, so it was you two or the exceeded and the two of it, right? And what I had said is I definitely felt like I was a Met plus, leaning towards the exceeded.
Yeah. I had the same. I said met with the asterisks that the real reason is only because there's still ongoing work. And like you said, if it were a 2-year goal, you're like, well, you're on track to meet your goal and surpass it. So I'm comfortable with having that one as exceeded for sure. Exceeded for sure.
The second one, it looked like we had 3 met and 1 exceeded, so that seems like that should be a met.
Yep.
Is that?
The second one.
Which was-
the second
Sorry,
one.
it's
Yes.
the second
Yes,
one that
I
we
know which
read,
one.
but not number 2. The
Yeah,
one
yeah.
that is the
DEI,
aligning, the DEI one.
Yeah.
Goal 3.
Yep. And so then the next one I think is actually goal 2, but it's third on the student learning
Right.
goal. That one felt like that was, I think it was a met and 3 exceeded.
I had exceeded with exceeded minus because of the K to
Yep.
5 writing
Yep.
piece.
And I had exceeded.
And I had exceeded. And-
Go
yep.
go with exceeded then. I'm comfortable with that. I mean, all of these I was straddling the line and just looking
know.
for a new reason to pull me in one direction or another. So I'm happy to mark it as exceeded.
And I think for folks at home too, this part of the evaluation to me feels more interpretive than
Right.
when we get down to the
Yeah.
indicators, it's really concrete about what is, exemplary versus, proficient. Okay, so that brings us then, did we do the,
We need to do
The
enrollment
MSBA
growth is
one.
exceeded and
that was all, yeah.
Yep.
Was all exceeded, and then the final one
admin team was all met.
was all met, I think, is that, yep.
So
All right.
2 overall, 2 mets and 3 exceeded.
Yeah, but at the top, what they do, we have to figure out which one is actually the professional practice goal because.
So, I think
you
we have
to
somebody who's
separate it out
great,
from the student.
a great expert on that here in
Yeah,
the room with
right.
us. So the professional practice goal was, which one do you have as that, your professional, is it
So
the
I
growth?
think under 3, that might have been one that I said crisscrossed between professional practice and district improvement.
Number 3, is it the one that's beginning the work of aligning the,
Yes, so that's definitely district
Okay.
improvement.
yep.
But
And
there were some pieces of professional practice there.
Okay, so that's, and then the grow the administrative team, was that the professional practice too? Or is there just the,
Let me take a look at that worksheet. Goal 4 was district improvement.
Okay.
So that was the
what about goal
and goal
5?
5. I think that's a district one as well.
Okay, so the professional practice is the one, the DEI one,
The DEI.
in terms of putting them, okay. All right,
Seems somewhat arbitrary. I don't
a
know.
little
I kind
bit.
of felt like the administrative team wants to see more professional practice, but well, I guess they both. Yeah, they both are.
They kind of toe the line, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about district improvement and professional practice. Sometimes there's an intersection of them, I think.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So you're saying the DEI goal is the one that we're going to consider for the professional practice. So whatever we rated there's only one of those, right? So
so in the DEI one, we put as a met, so the professional practice would be a met.
and then the 2 student learning ones will end up exceeded.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were exceeded.
And then the 2 district improvement ones.
And then, right, they
We're
were,
split?
one was,
No.
yep, so we were split between those two, so that's,
Well, I think because of the extra stars on enrollment growth, we might want to take that, since they come together in district improvement.
Yeah, I think 5 was professional practice as I look at it now.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
It's 6 of one, half a dozen, in terms of like the,
Right.
because we had a split on both. right?
2 student
We
achievement.
did, and they, yes, so they,
2 district, 1 professional practice at the end. Although I do think I labeled number 3 both. Back in June or July when we did
I
these.
appreciate you validating that I saw that somewhere.
Right.
Okay, so if we're then considering number 5, the professional practice goal, that's a Met, anyway, right? That's the-
Yeah.
Which, just for people at home, the Met is means you're right on track. It's a weird way that I think people assign in their head maybe a number with things, and that's not how DESE intends it to be. The student learning goals, that's where we
There was
had
math and writing.
math and writing, and I have to flip-flopping between things. That was
I think it was 2 exceeded.
2 exceeded, yep. Thank you. I'm just trying to click this into my thing so that I have it for when I go to consolidate it. And then the district improvement goals were the split ones, one of which each. How do people feel? Were we going, because there were stars towards exceeded on that?
For which one? I'm sorry.
For the district improvement goals?
We're split. We have 1 met and 1 exceeded. So overall, is it exceeded or?
I feel like ESBC 2 work trumps it all.
I-
to be totally honest with you.
Yeah. You do.
All stars, okay. So, true story.
Just keep saying one day there'll be a ribbon cutting.
That's right.
Let's hope so. We still have a long way to go.
I do. I know. Okay, so then when we go into the indicators, sorry, I'm blanking on words for a minute. So I have that we did not select 1A. So in the way that this works for people at home is the ones that we don't agree to in the summer when we're having that conversation, we don't evaluate on. That's really allows us to focus on things and come to consensus on the things that we are evaluating without looking at additional things. Years ago, we did used to do all of them before they had changed the way that the evaluation was. And I do think this allows us better focus to look at the evidence really on those specific ones. 1B, instruction, I have as one of the indicators, ensures that practices in all settings reflect high expectations regarding content and quality of effort and work, engage all students, and are personalized to accommodate diverse learning styles, needs, interests, and levels of readiness. And just, everybody has the
rubric.
the rubric, so that if we have any disagreements, I think we can look to kind of see where the rubric guides us. Anybody want to jump in first? Okay.
I had exceed or exemplary, I guess it is,
Yeah.
for this, and I think this is for me a personal strength of Dr. Kavanaugh's in general, but specifically this year, and I know not everyone maybe got the full vision, but I was convinced, personally anyway, that there was a huge commitment to SPED instruction and improving special education and taking a look and not looking at outcomes that were not what we were looking for, and then coming forward with a plan to address special education. So it's like one example of a million where I think Dr. Kavanaugh really uses information, data to drive instruction and better practices. And one of the things I think I said about the per pupil expenditure, and I don't know that I said it in a clear way, but I feel like one of the ways that the district as a whole is able to be as efficient as we are with our money is because of the thoughtful programming. It's not just Band-Aid solutions here and there. And so I think when we deliver instruction, it comes out of a place of a comprehensive approach that uses sort of everybody, all of our talents to deliver instruction. So anyway, going a long way to say disciplinary writing goal and all the work we talked about there was a positive for me, and the commitment to data and analysis, the STAR data and all the data. So that was me.
So what's interesting is because of the special education, I put it as proficient.
Interesting.
Because I was like, we have a whole group of students that we're not where we wanted them to be, and we spent this year putting together the plans and starting them to go on that journey to get to that high level of achievement, hopefully. But we don't know exactly if they landed yet, right? We've been, so we're kind of catching them up. And to be fair, I put that this year was, it's hard to remember because it feels like forever, but the school district is beginning to recover from COVID, right? Like, Jen is 1 year here. She started right at the end of last school year, right? And so when I think back to that, I'm like, there was a lot of learning loss that we know about, and I don't think it reflects on anything the school district is doing wrong, but I feel like the students are not quite where the goal could put them in order to exceed, but that's just me.
So, based on the wording of the rubric, how did you like it sets exemplary, it sets high expectations for the content and quality of instruction and empowers all administrators to do the same, such that instructional practices throughout the district are engaging, inclusive, and personalized to accommodate diverse learning needs of all students, stays informed of new evidence-based instructional practices, and provides resources and supports to implement them as needed, monitors principals and instructional staff to support these practices through observations and feedback. So there was so much of it that was sort of monitoring and intervening when needed, and that's where I got.
No, I totally can be convinced. Like everything else you said, like I said, it was just the special education swung me one way versus the other, but yeah.
And you can sway me too. Like it's hard to understand the rubric.
I know.
I mean, the words are tough.
But let's see what everyone else
Well,
thought.
I also ranked this one as exemplary, and it's funny, as you were reading speaking your comments, reading your comments, whatever you were doing, it looked like you were reading my comments on the other. Hold on, I think that's not the correct one. That looks like 2, not 1. Here we go. I think that this is a particular area of strength for Dr. Kavanaugh. You have a very strong commitment to data-driven curricular decision-making. I think you might spend hours just for fun on DESI's website looking at the data available about all the things that it has available. And I referenced the goals like you did for K-6 math and writing and literacy. And I think the district's commitment to gathering data through a variety of different assessments and then working in collaboration with building and subject matter administrators to make decisions based on that, not just qualitative data, or quantitative data rather, but also on the quantitative data that the teachers are giving feedback. I think that's a key part. Sometimes the numbers don't speak everything. You need to have that narrative piece along with the numbers. And so I think this is another one of your jams, so to speak. I think this is something that you excel at. So I did put it as exemplary.
So I also put it as exemplary. The one thing that, in looking at the rubric itself, that jumped out at me was it empowers all administrators. And I feel like that, in addition to instruction being a strength of yours, I feel like you're also very good at empowering your administrators in each building and in each content area to really allow things to make those changes that need to be happening. And I think that, to me, is what sets the piece apart between the proficient and exemplary.
Yeah.
And just for context for people at home, the different ratings that we're using here, exemplary is sort of the highest, and then proficient is where the department expects things to be, and then needs improvement and unsatisfactory is it's that 4 thing across there. Okay. Do we want to circle back to the way we did with the goals to have those? And then the next one I have is 1C, which is assessment, ensures that all principals and administrators facilitate practices that propel personnel to use a variety of formal and informal methods and assessments to measure student learning, growth, and understanding, and make necessary adjustments to their practice when students are not learning. Sorry, I'm toggling between different things here.
All right.
I skipped 1C.
I didn't have 1C
I didn't
as a
have
focus
1C.
indicator
I
either.
think we go right to 1F.
Okay.
Yeah, I had 1 as a
Yeah,
focus
okay.
indicator. I was like, well, I didn't see that
I
one,
just
but
want to
okay.
say that. You know what I think I did was I when I was trying to set this up for myself to use, I crossed off the ones, and I must have just not crossed that one off.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings us down to 1F, which is student learning demonstrates expected impact on student learning based on multiple measures of student learning, growth, and achievement, including student progress on common assessments and statewide student growth measures where available. Okay.
I gave exemplary for a lot of the reasons I already said, but maybe that's too exemplary. I don't know.
No,
don't
I
know
did
how
the
you
same.
Get more data.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where those comments were sort of at the end of this standard. And so I lumped the 2 of them together in those comments, but I feel like they go hand in hand. And I mean, like you just said, I'm not sure that not sure that there's a district that uses more data.
I don't think there is. Kidding.
I know, right? I do really think you hang out there for fun, which worries me a little bit, but we'll let you do you. That's okay. Yeah, I also agree it's exemplary.
Okay. And this one was a little bit different because it doesn't have the corresponding descriptions of practice the way the other ones do. Yeah, just for that. I also put that as exemplary. And I would have been doing it for 3 in the same thing since I shot a little higher. Leah, did you have comments on?
No, so my copy, and I tried to fix it, and then it seemed like it didn't. My copy for that doesn't have a rating.
It doesn't.
It doesn't have a
Okay.
checkbox now.
Okay.
No, it
I was
doesn't.
like,
have to interpret it.
Yeah.
okay. I was like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah. So I didn't actually put anything in after looking at the rubric. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna use it as feedback for the rest of it.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Well, just on this topic, I will say the other thing I like about the culture that Dr. Kavanaugh creates in the district is that we're not afraid to look at data that's not favorable. Like that is actually
Yes,
informative
that
data.
is a huge
There are
positive.
districts where you want to sweep it under the table or you don't want to, we see it. Dr. Kavanaugh just put that mental health stuff up there. It's like, okay, that was there were some things to look into, and I think because of the transparency and the willingness to treat the data as information that can inform practice, the district benefits, and that starts with you. So, thank you for that.
I would agree. So if we want to wrap up 1, since before we move on to 2, it was a little bit different because we didn't have the thing, but I put the overall as instructional leadership as exemplary.
As did I.
Yeah,
Yep.
seems.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so that brings us down into 2, which is management and operations. And I have, just before we start, 2D and 2E on this.
Yep, that's what I've got too.
Okay. So 2D is law, ethics, and policies, understands and complies with state, federal law mandates, school committee policies, collective bargaining agreements, and ethical guidelines.
So I'll go and I'll tell you that even with the rubric in front of me, I feel like I feel like I should mark it exceed, and then I read it again, and I feel like I should mark it met, and then I go back and forth. I think this is something that is a huge strength for Dr. Kavanaugh. I also have the unique, with her. So I think, anytime something new comes out from MASC, she's on it and will suggest policies. I think that her knowledge is vast. I think that she does provide the resources for the school personnel, which falls under the exceed side. I think that sometimes during conversations and policy, maybe we should call it working group, not subcommittee, whatever we are. I think that we sometimes realize that the resources need to be put out there, and it's not a question of her keeping them from people. It's just like during conversation, we're like, we need to make sure this goes on the website, or we need to make sure this goes in the handbook. And so that's where I was wavering back and forth. I mean, it's not a in any way a criticism so much as it is like sometimes how can you there's how many policies are there, 200 and something? I don't even remember what it is. There's a lot, so there's no way you can possibly have them all memorized, and when an issue arises and you realize there isn't information available, you make it available. So so I checked this as met, but I really do feel like this is one where I wavered back and forth because I think it's something she puts a lot of focus and energy into, and it's just one of those things that the laws and the policies are mountainous, vast, and so to be able to memorize and know all and put it all out there, I mean, it's there, and she makes it available as soon as she finds out there's a need for it to be available. I think that's the critical piece.
So I put it as met, and I went a lot of back and forth.
Proficient.
Proficient. And most of it was because of the evidence that was presented. Most of the evidence was HTA related. And so I was like, so I actually put this, I feel as though the relationship with the HTA should not be the totality of 2D, even though that is the information presented. I have to admit that the difficulty of that communication makes me unsure how to judge this particular metric. We have good moments and bad moments. In terms of policies and mandates, Carroll is exemplary. In terms of the actual bargaining agreements, our school district did well, finding a great middle ground where teachers receive new benefits to support them. So it was because the HTA was used as like the primary evidence that I ended up in met. I feel like if it had been, the policies passed and if that had been like half of the evidence that was presented, then I probably would have gone towards exemplary, if that makes sense.
I'm just going to read, just for people at home, the difference between the proficient and the exemplary. The proficient is understands and complies with state and federal laws and mandates, school committee policies, collective bargaining agreements, and ethical guidelines, and provides the resources and support to ensure district-wide compliance. Exemplary is provides the resources and support for all school personnel to understand and comply with state and federal laws and mandates, school committee policies, collective bargaining agreements, and ethical guidelines, and models this practice for others.
Yeah, even the rubric was kind of...
In this one, in a lot of them, it's really very cut and dry, I feel like, in the rubric. This one, the piece that I think was a little bit different between them was providing the resources versus complying personally, and then modeling the practice for others. It's a hard... It's hard to tease out between those two exactly where...
Because I think she models the practice, and I feel like if someone needs a resource, she gets it to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's the time frame for providing, before or after? Like, do they need it? I don't know, but I could go either way on this one.
I have to say, I didn't waver on this one. I was pretty strong exemplary.
Okay.
And the reason for this particular one, and among all the other things you said about policy, and I think Dr. Kavanaugh brings forward policy, like when there's a practice that is out of alignment, like she proactively brings that stuff forward. But aside from all that, the district is a complicated place, and it seems that we face issues that are legal in nature and become legal in nature frequently. And I feel like I have 100% confidence, and maybe partly I didn't limit myself to what was presented as evidence. I went with my whole impression of the year, and I think I'm biased by previous years as well. But consistently, I feel like Dr. Kavanaugh will hold the law, and that's very difficult to do in the face of human issue. Like you talk to someone, and I think it's easy to want to do more or want to be be the answer that the person's looking for, even, you know, when it makes sense. And I think that sometimes I have seen her, you know, just be consistent, which is very hard to do, and I think that has kept our district well protected. And so I think that's very hard to do. And I think we've all seen people in the news, you know, who, you know, take liberties with things. You think, well, of course she has to follow the law. But I mean, I think there is a real commitment. And whether it, you know, when something comes up, I think she tries to seek counsel where necessary, using our counsel, and then that's holds that line for us. Right. And it's unambiguous. And it's hard for a family to hear no or hear that's not. And I think even in the face of that, she'll hold the line. So I appreciate that. But, you know, I'm only one person, so if you guys think it's proficient, then that's okay too.
I struggled back and forth, but I struggled, I think, kind of on the other side. Whereas I went back and forth, I did feel like it was more exemplary than proficient. What I drew that from, but, you know, able to be swayed for sure. But I was drawing on a lot of the things where it has been really cut and dry. We need legal advice, but also the times when you've reached out to the commissioner, when you've reached out to DESE, when you, and I know the other piece that came to mind for me was, you know, I know you've worked with the Mass Association of School Superintendents on advocacy around, you know, Mass general laws for things in particular, looking at the way that the money is coming in for circuit breaker, and I know that you have been in fairly regular correspondence with our state representative, because he always tells me who's talked to you.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's great. I mean, I think that those are, you know, that's a different angle of the law. I mean, certainly making sure that our district is in compliance and making sure that, you know, ethics and policies, a billion policies it seems like we've brought forward, but we've had several new policies in the past year, it seems like, too, that have been either currently under consideration.
Right. And they were in reference to some of the other goals that she's, so she brought forth policies on equity, financial assistance, and we have the new CPAC policy that isn't in effect yet, but still has been, you know, a work in progress, so.
Well, and I think when I think of equity, I think of that as being like an ethical compass.
Yeah, right.
Of sorts.
Right, as is financial assistance in a way. You
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah,
offer
right.
opportunities to only students who can afford to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think all those things are.
And we've had some really nuanced discussions this year, I think almost more than any other year I can remember on some of those issues.
Yeah, yep. So I mean, I agree. I couldn't parse out the language of the rubric, so I am happy to switch mine to exemplary, because I do think this is an area of focus, and like you said, there's not a lot of, like, it is what it is. You're willing to have the hard conversations if you have to have the hard conversations, and nobody wants to have the hard conversations, but you do it because it has to be done. Yeah.
All right, do you want to circle back to that?
Sure.
And do the other 2E, which is fiscal systems, develops a budget that supports the district's vision, mission, and goals, allocates and manages expenditures consistent with district and school level goals and available resources. What did I say?
Sorry, we're talking over you because we're like, do you?
Yeah, we're like, this is a 1, 2, 3 now.
Oh, yes, I agree with that.
Apologies for talking over you.
That's all good. I did want to call out a couple things that
Yes.
were really
Yeah.
exceptional
Probably should.
to me. Just, you know, the budget process was really hard this year, and the schools rose to the occasion on very short time frames and produced high quality, you know, thoughts and high quality documents, you know, from one day to the next almost. It was, you know, we started at the 5.1%, then we were looking at trying to cut 1.7 million, then we were looking at the 350,000, and it was like a ping pong ball. And I thought that was as challenging as it was. And I think for some of us, and maybe just I'll speak for myself, but it's emotional when we're talking about that. But you really kept to keeping the students first, and keeping the excellent things that we're doing consistent with our, you know, our district improvement and school improvement goals. I also think the management of district resources is outstanding, and we've been kept informed of different fluctuations in different situations in a way that is very transparent. I don't know that every school committee has that level of transparency, and I appreciate that. And the other piece, I also went outside the lines, but thinking back to the truck for buildings and grounds that didn't make our capital budget, the use of our revolving funds to purchase it, because that was something that was really needed based on the condition of the existing truck, I thought was a really great use of that, and a quick kind of turnaround to realize we can't wait another year to do that. And
That's the genius of Mrs. Rodamy.
But you hired her.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar comments, right? I acknowledged from the very first time that they had to turn around the budget, how hard and frankly ridiculous it was to ask someone to turn around the budget that large in 2 days. And you all did an exemplary job with it. And you also collaborate with the budget in a clear and concise manner the entire freaking year. Like, you know, none of us are financial experts, and yet, you know, when Susan presents the budget, we all clearly understand what she's talking about. We all really get a feel for what the needs are. You know, when the principals come and talk about what they need, it's always very clear and very well pointed. So your entire school district does a really good job with communication of the finances and the fiscal needs, which is, once again, a very rare ability. And the fact that your district, all of your principals, and everyone seems to be well trained in how to communicate hard concepts in a way that makes you understand their need, it is pretty amazing. So,
And I will say, when they ask for something, they really need it.
Right.
yeah.
They truly need it.
Well, even the way you had presented to us some of the asks that, as a team, you decided wouldn't come forward, and you know, those decisions, those conversations that you lead with your team, also I think are exemplary. The way you really do only bring forward what is needed and needed for students. And everything else you said was perfect.
Yeah.
that
That's an
is
easy
an
one.
easy one. That
Yeah,
was
that was-
absolutely an easy one. So,
Yeah.
okay. That brings us into the family and community engagement. And the one that I have on this is communication engages in regular two-way, culturally proficient communication with families and community stakeholders about student learning and performance.
Yep.
Thoughts?
I struggle with this one. I actually don't. I think I checked both proficient and exemplary at the end, so I don't know if that's helpful. But on the one hand, amazing work with our director of equity, access, and inclusion. And I don't know what I made that up. Is that right? No,
Director of English Language Acquisition,
that's it.
comma, equity and access. Yeah. So she's a 50-50 split.
I mean, having, you know, that wasn't a this year hire or anything, but I mean, the commitment to having that amazing position staffed by an amazing individual with great talent, who can bring cultural proficiency into our communications, who can ensure that we have all the languages covered. I mean, all of that work is incredible. I think the reason why in this particular one I was leaning toward proficient was because of some of the hiccups that we had earlier in the year with communication with the community. And again, this was tough because, I mean, the communication there's so many stakeholders. And I think bringing in the legislators, huge plus, all the work you're doing there. I think the municipal partners that you've communicated with across the budget and, you know, every other thing, and the tight relationships that you've built there so that you can have all the communications necessary to, you know, get our budget passed at town meeting, are huge. So I hate to, you know, stop on the hiccups, but I don't want to not acknowledge that there were some hiccups of communication, particularly around the budget, with special education earlier in the year, and just the timing of communications. You know, I took that event or that sort of series of events, and I kind of it was a blur between communication for me and shared vision. So I was wrestling with where I felt like maybe the opportunity lied, which one of those categories. And I can be swayed on this, because I think it was a little of both. It was a little bit of a not communicating a shared vision on special education and what the new organization would look like, maybe, and a little bit on communication. But otherwise, amazing work.
I was an E because I took this specifically as culturally responsive communication.
Okay.
And so, I mean, even my comment, when I compared to the concerns for just 2 years ago from parents of students in English language learning, who were, you know, if everyone remembers, they were saying, I didn't hear that my kids were in this and all of that. You know, we have moved leaps and bounds. The district created a responsive plan to address those concerns, has grown LPAC into a healthy, vibrant group, and continue to address sending out messages in multiple languages used by our school community, along with the CRIOP work. I really think that this is a proficiency that has been exceeded. I believe that there's been just so much work to continually adapt as our school changes in demographics and in concerns of parents.
I agree 100%.
I know you're drawing me over, so I marked this one as proficient, even though I think it is one of Dr. Kavanaugh's huge strengths. I think if a person emails you, they're going to get an email back. If a person calls you, they're going to get a phone call back. You are incredible at making sure that if someone asks you for something, you give them a response, and if it's the response they don't want to hear, that's the you have to navigate that. I think that's important. I did think that this year, like you kind of mentioned, there were just times where it wasn't that you weren't communicating the information, it was just that for some reason the translation, and I don't mean from a culturally proficient perspective, but just from like the intended message and the message that was received was for some reason not the same. And it happened a couple times, and I don't know why, because I think I heard what you were saying. It just wasn't being heard by some other folks, and could be a whole host of reasons for that. But I agree 100% with what you said in terms of the ongoing work that's been done with making sure that communication that happens no matter what is being done in a culturally proficient way with the community as a whole. And you attend so many events in town that are not even sort of school related, but you make a point of being out there in the community so that folks have a chance to talk to you and they have access to you. And I can see how that piece of it would all be viewed as exemplary, and it is exemplary. I just don't know why this year in particular it felt like some people weren't hearing the message that you were sending, and so that's why I ranked it as proficient and would happily be drawn over to exemplary, I think, because of all those other reasons. So
I agree with you, because I think some of my concerns, like I said, I could be comfortable in the shared vision conversation we'll have later.
Right.
So I think I was going along with where Leah was thinking in terms of this, in the really focusing on the culturally proficient communication, and I was focusing on the revision of the registration process to support low-income students and those who don't speak English. Also, really thinking about some of what I have heard from LPAC families, some of what I've seen with the LPAC is the commitment to making sure that all communications are going out in the language that is best understood at home. Also, they have a texting app so that Jen Suker, they can send text out to families. They receive it in the language that they've chosen. And she's worked, I know, with families to make sure that the translations are appropriate both ways, which to me is like amazing technology, and great that the district was able to acquire it without having really known about it until, this year. It wasn't something we discussed during the budget last year. It wasn't something that came forward. And things like making sure there's funding for translators at LPAC meetings that are live translators. That I feel like that piece was exceeded. I wasn't thinking as much about some of the other pieces that you guys brought up.
I agree, because the communication spin in the rubric was very specific about So like for E, supports and empowers all administrators to engage in regular two-way culturally responsive communications with families about student learning and performance. District-wide communications with families are provided in multiple formats and respect and affirm different families' home languages, cultures, and values. And the difference between P and E is in P, it's that she would engage in regular 2A, and in E, she supports and empowers all administrators to engage.
You sold me.
Another piece that I know it happened that I think really did help with our LPAC growing was that in ESOL is that it used to be that stuff was all going out by U.S. mail, and people weren't always like finding it in a thing, and it like the district looked in to figure out why people weren't knowing, why they weren't looking into it, and found a way that really has helped families, I think.
That makes sense. That makes
The very
sense.
exciting thing that Jen has done is we now have Lexikey, so
Yes.
if there's a reason that you need an interpreter, like immediately, that's available to us now, and we didn't have that before.
And I did note that there also was the consideration of when there are things that would need to just also comply with not just FERPA but HIPAA to make sure that the translation services were compliant with both.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. So are we on that just as an overall rating?
I'll go E. I mean, for all, I was
I'm
already in
comfortable
E
with
all
E
the
as well.
areas you say. It was
Yeah.
just where does that other
Yeah.
piece belong? But you're right, the way the rubric is
says it.
written,
Yeah.
it's an E.
Yep.
Okay, and that was the only one for 3, so in my mind that would kind of make the overall rating an E.
Right?
How'd you get that?
I
Did you
didn't
average
know.
it? Or?
My math is maybe not as strong as some, but I was able to handle that.
She did percentages.
Took a second to calculate. Yeah.
So the next one I have here is, we're on to 4, which is professional culture. I have 4D and 4E and 4F.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's
that's what I have.
And 4D is continuous learning, develops and nurtures a culture in which staff members are reflective about their practice and use student data, current research, best practices, and theory to continuously adapt practice and achieve improved results. Models these behaviors in his or her own practice.
I rated this as exemplary. I mean, the mountain of evidence that was submitted to support a ranking of exemplary, I think, I mean, it was, you know,
Yeah.
the work that's been done in the district at all levels for this particular indicator, I don't think you could, I know, it'd be tough to argue.
Yeah.
Tough to draw me away from that.
Totally. And I think the other thing that I added above and beyond the evidence that we gathered is Carroll and the school district have constant flexibility, which is a very difficult skill to have. So you were talking about that. I have that in my comment. Many people fall back on the ways things have always been and resist change. In our school district, this doesn't seem to be the case. The willingness to redirect, accept new ways to support your children, and always learn more is a trait that we see from the top all the way to the bottom in the school district. So.
I also had put down just the elementary learning team and the secondary learning team and just your support of the administrators and empowering them. I think really is a way in which you develop and you nurture the culture in your staff members to think about their practices and to work, collaboratively with one another and with you. You have a very strong team that you have.
An amazing team.
But that's, I think, also a big credit to you as well.
100%.
So shared vision is 4E, which is successfully and continuously engages all stakeholders in the creation of a shared educational vision in which every student is prepared to succeed in post-secondary education and become a responsible citizen and global contributor.
So this was a 2-year one, right? This was labeled as a 2-year one.
Well, these are goals. That was confusing.
These are indicators, and I have in here a note that you were looking to have it moved to a 3-year piece. Is that,
I would like to keep going with this.
Yep.
I feel like we have a lot of work to do here.
Yeah.
And we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and I gave it a P partially because of that. So, you know, I think a lot has happened in this area that leads me to think the goal will exceed expectations. When the time is complete, the students now have the opportunity to be on school committee as ex officio members. They're able to intern as student teachers within the schools. There's the whole child plan, right, that was implemented in the high school, which, by the way, I would love to see how it's progressing because I don't think we've seen it since it was sort of initially introduced.
You mean the vision of the graduate?
The vision of the graduate, yeah. So, like, you can see it, you know, it's all like coming together into this amazing package that gives students so much opportunity. So.
In the spring, I don't know if you remember, but last year we had that woman, Susan Drucker, who was a researcher at UMass, who said that she would do a survey for us with the graduates in the class of 22.
Oh, yes.
To see, you know, how their Hopkinton Public Schools experience prepared them for life after Hopkinton Public Schools. So Mr. Bishop is sending that out as well. I mean, I think that he just communicated with her the other day, so it's time to get that to the class of 22. There's just more, you know, whether it's CVTE or, you know, how we're really preparing our kids to say, it's okay if you don't want to go on to a 4-year school. What are the other options?
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
I love that you want to make this a multi-year goal. I don't know how that translates to an indicator.
Right.
So, you know, for me, the indicators are professional attributes or qualities that, you know, are evidenced or not in a year, like, irrespective of really what you accomplish. Like, in a way, the goal is more about like to me, I don't know, maybe I don't really understand these things, but to me, the goal, we have these goals and you have specific accomplishments. These are things that you know, provide evidence that you have done, like you've exhibited them. They're traits or something, I don't know. So whatever, my thing with the shared vision, I was blown away that we got to the shared vision of 2-3-4 school. So the whole shared vision development around, and I know this was not specifically called out in your evidence, but it is part of shared vision. And I think mobilizing the community in a thoughtful way that took input, and you know, it really a beautiful process to watch us get in such a short time to the vision of the 2-3-4 school, which is incredibly essential for us as we move forward and address our enrollment growth and have more opportunities for new programming. You know, there's a whole bunch of greatness that opens up. But that kind of vision can be very difficult to get people on board with. It's a lot of change. And so huge kudos to you for that and all the research and reading and preparation you did in advance.
And even the work with the consultants. I almost forgot about all of that.
Right. Yeah. To me, that's a lot.
Now that you say it.
To me, that's huge. So I think vision's great. I think the fact that we have vision of the graduate,
Right.
I would love to also, that was one of my notes too, I'd love to have a report out on how that's going. But the vision of the graduate is great. The part where I called up before, I felt like I could see a vision for some of the special education changes that you were making structurally, and I feel like that vision, in advance of where we kind of got tripped up on budget and et cetera, I think the vision of how the new design was going to improve things didn't somehow get communicated. So that was an area I thought we could maybe do better. I love the stuff you put in here about the middle school. And that whole piece, and particularly as we look at the mental health survey results and think about what we can do with after-school programming to engage our kids off the phones for 6 or 3 or 4 hours a day, whatever it was. You know, I love that you're going deep dive on that, and for the middle school and high school, and I think I would love to support that in any way I can. But I wasn't sure, you know, I was on the fence. I think I checked both P and E, just only because of that, the vision with the special education. I wished people could, though, you know, we went through so many conversations around people's concerns, and I kept wishing that people had embraced the vision, you know, in advance, because I think the vision is a solid one.
So I marked, I know I was a stickler earlier, and this one I marked as exemplary for lots of the reasons that you've brought up. But one of the things that really struck me in the evidence that I think is like a sort of shining example of how, especially when you look at the words all stakeholders, like the students for sure it's what we're here for. But the piece that was in the evidence about the guidance counselors in the middle school who felt like they were more like, I can't remember what the word was, academic. They felt they were more academic counselors, and they were worried about how that might be impacting their work with students. And the fact that, two things, I think, the fact that they were comfortable conveying that how the vision of what they envision their job to be and what their job is actually, and any sort of, variation between those two things. But also the fact that, when you heard it, you were like, we need to sort of look at all of this data and pull it together and figure out if what they're doing is do we need more people? Do we need different people? Do you need to make behavioral adjustment counselors as opposed to thinking of a guidance counselor as someone who's going to work in that sort of arena? So I feel like that piece all feeds into the idea of what you said, the shared vision that it's not going to happen in a year, and it's not going to happen, even in 2 years. It's going to take a long time to steer at how many people are in the district, 4,000 students, 1,000 adults. To take that and sort of shift it into a vision that was created takes time. So I feel like the work that has been done to that end is exemplary, and that's why I marked it as exemplary. And I for sure think there's still more work to be done, but it's not going to be finished anytime soon. So I feel like, that kind of rated it on what has been done in an effort to achieve that vision.
Sometimes when I read that one, I have like palpitations. There's so much work to do.
So unless it's going to be a goal next year. It's like one of your 5 goals, right?
Yeah, that makes great sense.
Yeah.
Transitioning this from indicator status to goal status.
Yeah, and maybe probably still calling out this indicator because it'll be a focal point.
Yeah,
I agree
it will
with
be a
you.
focal point.
All that was exemplary as exhibited this
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
So I'm a line straddler. Some of the stuff is just so outstanding that I feel like in some ways we're talking about different things in here that could be called out as separate indicators. But one thing that I really love and I really appreciate is the way that we have, working to shape what the vision of succeeding is. That it's not, it used to be so much pressure on kids, and that the path to success was really just this, 4-year college felt like for a lot of kids. The ability to do some of the dual enrollment and the CVTE and just the conversation has changed, and the opportunities that kids have, and looking at different best practices and different opportunities for kids has really, I think, elevated, I think that's both good for kids and the way they're figuring out their own path to success, but I think it's also good for social emotional health because kids are going to go to, what feels good to them and what they're able to define as their own success, and moving away from sort of the societally imposed piece of what kids feel like they must do. I do feel like there is definitely, and this is where I guess I straddle the line, there definitely is, it's such a big thing that I love the idea of making it like a 3-year goal and elevating it that way, and that's really more where I was, is just a lot of work to be done, and not because of you specifically, but because just it's a big thing.
Yes, if we go back to town meeting and look at the changing of our demographics, you need that the needs now of our kids are very different from what they were 10 years ago.
Well, and I love,
You have to redefine that, I think.
I love that you keep looking at what the needs are and how they're changing, and looking at the data and figuring out different pieces of who we have in our schools right now compared to who we had 10 years ago. And I think that's, I think it's important ongoing work. So that's.
So you want to do
So you
a
have 2
goal for
straddle
next
the
year.
line. You have
Yeah,
1 P and 1 E.
so nothing like really splitting it down the middle.
So I'm the only one. Everything in my assessment was E, except I wish there's been more uptake of the special education vision. So I'm the only one who even put that in this equation, and it wasn't in the evidence. So I'm willing to go E. I mean, E, it's an easy E for me on all the other things. I was the only one, so I'm an outlier there, so I
Well,
think you should.
I was a P.
But your P was for different, well, yours was a different,
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
in terms of
yeah,
that you weren't the only one
the
who
only
was
P, yeah.
towards the middle.
Yes, but she was, now my brain is starting.
She
to
was
mush.
very
She was
E.
very E, you were very P. You and I
was
straddled the line,
flip-flopper.
but if you flip over to E, that puts our average closer to the E. Because
But
we.
then if we look across,
Yeah.
are we too E heavy?
Okay, so let's move on to 4F and come back and come up with, where people want to go with that one. So 4F is managing conflict, employs strategies for responding to disagreement and dissent, constructively resolving conflict, and building consensus throughout a district or school community. And boy, there are lots of conflicts that come up as a school superintendent to have the opportunity to manage.
So I was P on this one as well. And part of it is because just like every other part of the rubric, it has to do with less about Carol and more about the administration as a whole when you get into E. So I think, so my comment about Carol is managing conflict is a forever struggle. I think Carol is really good at following up after conflict occurs and taking steps to try to mitigate the problem. The superintendent job is high conflict, high stress, and that gets to even the most stoic of individuals. Being able to collect yourself after those incidents and then calmly and logically try to find your way out of a difficult situation requires an ability to step back that not everybody possesses. So in terms of Carol, some of the stuff that has happened, I personally, emotionally, would have a really hard time then reaching across the aisle and saying, okay, let's resolve this. And she's done a great job. The reason I ended up at a P was because, I hate to say this on air, certain other administrators in similar positions were not as good at dealing with the conflicts. And so I felt like the part that says the team, which is where E shines, I felt like there was still some steps to go for certain team members to learn to manage conflict as well as she does. So since that was the difference between P and E, that's why I ended up at P.
This is weird, and this is weird because this one is written, the E is models a variety of strategies. It doesn't actually say anything about the other people,
Okay.
which is weird. The proficient is employs strategies.
Right.
I really don't know quite what the difference there is, but
Yeah, I think I took modeled as models
Yeah.
it for other, I can go the other way, but like I
yeah.
said, in terms of Carol herself,
yeah.
I felt like there were some very hard emotional moments. There was some really hard personal conflict that occurred. And she managed to take a step that honestly I'm not sure I would have easily been able to do, to meet the other party in the middle and start to work together. Right? So if you guys want to call that an E, I'm okay with that. I was just trying to hold to the rubric.
Okay. I did rank this one in E because there, as has already been said, there were kind of a few things that went on this year. But one of the things that I think is a huge strength of Carol is that you maintain this huge aura of professionalism in the face of these conflicts. And I agree with Leah. I would have been ready to throw down a few times, and you just are, stoic in that you are not gonna let your emotion, although there must have been some, you keep yourself in check, and you for sure are, it's like an argument with someone who later on you can go hang out with, but in that moment there's so much emotion that you feel like, we have all have partners at home that we probably have had similar incidences with, where you're like, I may not be able to talk to you for a few months, but that's sort of, the level of emotion that some of these conflicts this year, I feel like some of them heightened to a pretty kind of equivalent level of emotion, and you
maintained the most professional decorum the entire time, and as you mentioned, like reaching across the aisle, you know, I think have made huge gestures, and not just gestures, but like have made efforts to say, all right, we're gonna fix this, and so what do we need to do to fix this? So to me, that really speaks to managing conflict. It's not escalating because of you, it's diffusing because of you, and it's being fixed because of you. And I think that's sort of what an exemplary manager of conflict is. So for this one, I did put it as exemplary.
I had exemplary as well. So my only thing I would add to everything that has been said is, again, I think Dr. Kavanaugh has an ability that not all human beings have, and certainly not all administrators have, of not relenting when a compromise, even if it would achieve harmony, would not be in the best interest of students. So I feel like there are, you know, lots of times, whether it's budget related or, you know, family concerns or like whatever it is, you know, all those things. We'll listen to conflict, does not shy away from conflict. We'll face it, have an open discussion, but won't just sway for harmony and peace, which is huge, because that is a huge, it's very easy for any of us to do. And so I think being able to stay true to, like, keep regrounding herself and the district in students, what's best for students, whether, like I said, whether it's money, you know, curriculum changes, staffing, whatever. I have a lot of respect for that. So.
Yep.
I also thought this was exemplary, but part of why I thought this was exemplary was in part because there has been a lot of conflict that you've had to manage. And I think that you empower your administrators, you support your administrators, you help them to reach, you know, good conflict management within the different communities that they're working in. You know, I don't think that any position is going to, particularly at the level that you're at, not have high levels of conflict, because I think when things go wrong, you're the go-to. You're the superintendent. But I also think a real strength for yours, and I hesitate to say this because sometimes I feel like for your own longevity in the district, maybe you shouldn't do, you know, you need to take time for yourself. And I think you take time out of your vacations. I know, like, over the December break, you took time that was supposed to have been your vacation time, working very heavily on conflict resolution, you know, and complicated stuff. And your dedication to that, your dedication to parents who reach out when they're having conflict. And I think back to what Amanda said, your unwillingness to compromise where it's not in the best interest of students to compromise is a strength, but your door is always open for people to talk to, for people to have, you know, you're modeling that for your administrators, to listen to the community, to listen to parents and other stakeholders. And that's, you know, now I'm forgetting, I think it was Leah that said it, that there have been some really high charge conflicts that, you know, maybe would have made some of us crumble a little bit. And because I know that you had to have felt the emotion of it, but you kept the path moving forward in a way that, you know, I think brings us to the other side and models it for the people that work with you.
The only thing I want to add, because I was thinking back to our my preparation for the workshop we did with CPAC. This is nothing about the workshop, but I had done a little thinking about who are all the stakeholders that school committee has to, you know, answer to. Like who do we work for? Like who are all the stakeholders? Who are all the superintendent stakeholders and so forth? Just for a fun little mental exercise. And I just remember, you know, if you look at the list of stakeholders that you have to navigate, I mean, you start with the five of us, and that's 5 individuals and 1 body, so it's almost like 6 things. You know, so that's, you know, and then, you know, between all of municipal partners, students who are sometimes not in line with families, who, you know, families, teachers, the union is its own entity. I mean, you know, it's just, there is just a huge list of stakeholders, and not everyone is happy all the time. And certainly you hear a lot of the unhappy, and many people are very gracious and send nice notes too, which is nice. But so you take all of that and then you put on these days that start like at 6 a.m. and you probably
Go to
have
midnight.
evening meetings 4 or 5 nights most weeks, that you're going home at 10, it's unbelievable, so I think to Jen's point, everyone's point really, but I think Jen said like could any human being be more professional in this situation. So I feel like you do an amazing job, and maybe people will watch this and think, well, but there was this time, or I think humans are humans. There may be a few times when the armor cracked a little. I haven't seen it that much, but I think it's just you're amazing in the way that you navigate everything, and you're unflappable.
So I do want to say, when I first came to school committee, one of the things that I remember that I walked in concerned about was actually conflict management. Then COVID hit. And you managed the hell out of COVID. that was like, wow. So seeing your growth over the last 3 years, because I know exactly the things I had in my head when I walked in the door, right? And conflict management, like I said, that was absolutely one of them. And now I can say absolutely nothing negative about your ability to handle the conflicts, to get through problems, to get through issues. So I just wanted to address that, from the starting point where I walked in the door to now, there has been just an incredible increase in your skills and your ability to deal with some of these external ones, not like the emails from parents and stuff, but like the big community kind of huge conflicts that are coming your way. And I really appreciate that growth. I'm going to go into 2 other things. I've also seen growth in the kind of special education area. We've always met the legality of it, but I think I've seen a lot more thoughtfulness towards, could this affect a special education child? Could this affect one of our underrepresented high needs children? It went from, we're sort of talking about the legality and the legal limit to, we should really, really think hard. I hadn't thought about the fact that that there might be a child who might be high needs, who we might not even realize because we've never put them into this situation, right? And then along with that, the fact that you've joined the Gifted and Talented Council, right? After, to me, that says a lot about your willingness to try to understand, how parents view their children, how children might be different, etc. So, since this is my last one, I really wanted to say, those are the things that have really struck me as I sat down and I thought about, I started 3 years ago, what did it look like? So, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Those are good ones.
Yeah.
And I didn't know you were on that council till I looked at this evidence. I don't know how I missed that part. Yeah. No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
There are a lot of things that you don't always, toot your horn, so to speak.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just forget.
But you do that. You give a lot of credit to everybody else who works with you. It feels like a lot of times we'll say, you did a great job with X or Y, and you always bring it back to your team. But, so that one, what I'm hearing is, I think, 3 exemplary and 1 proficient. Is that?
And the proficient is willing to change to exemplary.
Okay, so I will mark that one.
It was just based on my understanding of it.
This is why we all do it together, so we can figure out, not just for the awkwardness of evaluating somebody in a public setting, but so that we can.
Right. For that good time.
We need to find some new definitions of fun.
I know, between your data and your thinking about stakeholders, we're a fun bunch.
I love data. Data's good.
Data is very good.
Don't have data.
Just do data.
It's good.
Charts
it's
are
important.
fun.
They can.
Fun might be stretching it.
I'm a data scientist.
The shared vision we did not.
We didn't come to a consensus.
We were on shared vision. We had a P, an E, and then 2 straddlers. I think you and I were the straddlers going back to that. Was that the one that you said you're willing to go to exemplary?
I would,
on that?
yes.
Okay. Are you comfortable with that if we move that? Okay, so that would move the shared vision.
I don't think there's very many where I was like, it has just to
Right.
repeat.
Right. No.
Okay, so that then brings the overall rating for the standard of professional culture
I
in it
think we
as,
just did E on every
I think
single
we
one.
just, yes, we
Pretty
did.
close. I mean, that's how mine came out too.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the having to figure out the rating piece. The next step for this is if you guys can mail me your, email me if you want to adjust any of the comments based on news. Like sometimes I get new thoughts from listening to everybody else
Right.
speak.
Okay.
If you could kind of wrap those all up, and I will try to merge them and make sure that I capture the document both in a way that flows in a readable way, so it doesn't look like it was written by, I don't know. So,
Frankenstein.
wait, well, I was going to say the AI things, but actually they're not as bad as.
I was gonna say graph GPL.
Do you want to by tomorrow? Is tomorrow?
Oh,
Is that
no,
what you
no,
said?
I was
not
saying by
tomorrow.
the beginning of the week,
Oh,
because I was assuming that people might have more exciting weekends than I have coming up. They might not want to spend the whole weekend.
No, I did like bullet. I didn't do full sentences.
That's
so
okay, 'cause I can
need.
put-
I have like two documents. I need the
That's
weekend.
totally fine. Take the weekend.
I
and-
need Sunday to do it. Yeah.
And then I go through for like making sure that are like they're all from the same point of view, like not saying I, we, or they. We all kind of come up with a. So it sounds like we all did it together.
All right.
And so will Holly send you hers?
Yes. So we'll work with to get everything together for next week. Okay. So and then I am sad and reluctant to publicly say this, but I believe that next week is your last for both of you, barring any emergency
Yes.
meeting between next Thursday and.
I think we have policy ESBC2 and a school committee,
That's
so
good.
we're going
That's
out
good.
with
You know,
a bang.
so yeah, with a bang. And I would say you're going out of this term for a bang because we know that people do sometimes come back.
It could happen.
It could happen.
It could happen.
So, in that case, since we have brought this to a close for tonight, I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30A 21A2, specific to conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and the superintendent, because having the discussion in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position, and then we'll adjourn an executive session. So we will not be, for people watching at home, once we leave this table, we will not be coming back publicly.
So moved.
So a motion by Leah, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amanda, and we'll do a roll call because we're going into executive session. I'll start with you, Jen.
Yes.
Leah?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
I am also an aye, and we are adjourned into executive session at 8:37. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back here next Thursday night at 7 o'clock as well. So thank you. Have a good night.